Hello, my name is Bob Heilbroner, and this is a recording of the talk I gave to a class uh, given uh, at the extension service of the local university. And the class is called Support for Living a Meaningful Life in Dark Times. This class is intended as a direct response to the Trump MAGA experience and the rise of fascism that it represents. The class hopes to offer a safe place to support each other in living meaningful, rich, engaged and grateful lives in dark times. I want to say a little bit about what brings me to teaching this class. Um, I'm turned 80 recently, and my life has included a long period of being a full-time activist during the movements of the 60s and 70s, um, including being a writer and editor for Liberation News Service, which was sort of an AP for the underground press at that time, and being involved in various community organizing projects and Students for Democratic Society, some of the early chapters of Students for Democratic Society. Um, at some point, when it didn't look like the revolution was going to happen at anything like the timing we were hoping for, I needed to drink from a deeper well, and at that point, went through a midlife crisis that involved shifting um, my work to becoming a therapist and being trained as a body-oriented therapist. Um, Actually, in between there, I was a graduate level student at Berkeley and teacher at Berkeley of environmental economics class. I have an MA in environmental economics from Berkeley from that time. And then got into being trained as a body-oriented therapist and retired some years ago uh, after 35 years of providing mental health treatment, of which the last 20 years or so were to people in county mental health in the area where I live. So what brings me to this class is my effort to ongoingly integrate and share my integration of what used to be called the personal and the political, how those intersect. And therefore, how can we understand the hard times we're in and live meaningful lives at the same time? How can we meet the times and live joyful, engaged, meaningful lives? So I'm going to start over again with what I said. The class is intended as a direct response to the Trump MAGA experience and to the rise of fascism that it represents. The class hopes to offer a safe place to support each other in living meaningful, rich, engaged, and grateful lives in dark times. To do so, we have to create together a safe place to come as we are, to bring our whole authentic selves, a safe place to bring our authentic feelings of grief, anger, and shocked disbelief that our world and our nation have come to this, and a place to regroup and find each of us our rightful place in the healing transition that nature is, with increasing urgency and sternness, asking our species and our present culture to make. If the present upwelling of the darker side of human behavior challenges our faith in the human experiment, we are called upon to take a clear-sighted inventory, the unique gifts and the unique pitfalls of our human species. And just as it is with individuals, our gifts and our pitfalls, our strengths and our weaknesses are intimately related. So the unique gifts and pitfalls of the human species, of our human capacity for great cruelty and destruction, and our ability to love and nurture each other and the world, and thereby ourselves, and to live in harmony and in awestruck gratitude for the beauty of the world we have been given, our ability to belong in this world. Among the distinguishing characteristics that the evolutionary process has gifted and cursed our species with is the ability not only to live life, to spontaneously be placed in and live and fully live life, but also to witness ourselves living life, to be self-witnessing. That's both a curse and a danger in the sense that it allows us to be detached from the joy of and the immersion in and the instinctual and bodily heritage that helps us live life spontaneously. And it's a gift in the sense that it allows us to learn. So to see ourselves, so to speak, from the outside, and thus to witness and observe the effects of our behavior and to learn from our actions. And this is key, and importantly, to pass that learning on to following generations in the form of human culture, which is why I don't have to know how to make a refrigerator in order to use it. This cultural learning process is a key characteristic of the human experiment and is encapsulated in the succession of cultural paradigms which have shaped the way humans have viewed, experienced, understood, and acted in the world, and the political and economic institutions we have built to manifest and propagate that worldview. So that's the basic idea of Thomas Kuhn, who popularized the idea of cultural paradigm. And that brings us back to our Donald Trump experience and what we can learn from it. The reason we can learn from our Donald Trump experience is that what is happening in our country is not just the psychopathology of one deeply damaged human individual, but because Donald Trump is a living color cartoon, a caricature and a cartoon of everything that our present dominant paradigm has got wrong about how to live in the world. Donald Trump told us everything we needed So to repeat, the reason we can learn from our Donald Trump experience is that what is happening in our country is not just the psychopathology of one deeply damaged individual, but because Donald Trump is a living color cartoon of everything that our present dominant paradigm, including liberal democracy as shaped by oligarchical capitalism, that everything our dominant paradigm has got wrong about how to live in the world, how to live on the planet. Donald Trump told us everything we needed to know about him before he was ever elected, when he told us he could shoot someone in the middle of Fifth Avenue and suffer no consequences. And what he told us in that short episode was his worldview. And that worldview is, one, what happens to the other guy doesn't matter. The one who was shot doesn't matter. Two, that he would lose no followers, and that having followers is what matters because winning is all that matters. So there would be no consequences for his power, his winning. And three, and this is the most important one, that there are no consequences for his actions, that he is too big to be accountable for his actions. Now, that, of course, as we look at it now, he has practiced to a breathtaking and hard to believe degree. But if we look at those three principles so brazenly, innocently and brazenly expressed, shamelessly expressed, you can see that those three precepts, one, that the effect on the other, whether it's the other race, the other person, the other nation, the other species, the planet, that the effect on the other doesn't matter. And two, that winning is all that counts, that us getting what we want, that us being dominant and winning and getting what we want is all that matters, taking care of our winning, our dominance. And three, that there are no consequences for our actions. That those three principles, doesn't matter what happens to the other one, winning is all that counts, and power is all that counts, and there are no consequences for actions, is a good description of the way human beings have conducted themselves on the planet in the present dominant paradigm. Which is why what we can learn from Donald Trump, from our Donald Trump experience, is the need to build and transition to a new paradigm, a new way for human beings to live in the world. Which means we have to sharpen our awareness of how the existing dominant paradigm shapes the way we live our lives, both in our conscious beliefs and our unconscious assumptions, so that we can participate in the process of resisting and transforming it into a new paradigm that allows us to find our proper belonging in the whole, that allows us to both be ourselves and live in respectful communion and find our respectful place in the web of life upon which all life depends. In support of that, this class offers a historical and conceptual framework, how, like on the map, we are here, that explains what's going on here. A map to orient us. There's a reason why the four directions, north, south, west, east, and up and down, the six directions, above us and below us and inside us, seven directions. Why those are sacred in most native traditions, because it's about being oriented, and being oriented in time and space is a key place to be able to move forward. So a conceptual framework. This class hopes to often offer a sense of community and a place for sharing, and also to teach and practice experiential practices that help us locate the guidance of the life force within us as it lives in us and manifests itself in us. Now, at this point, I stopped talking and we went to a discussion, which is not recorded. But the basic question of the discussion was asking everyone in the class what brought them here and what they hope to get from the class. The dominant paradigm, the current dominant paradigm, which I'm calling the paradigm of narcissism, but it also takes many forms, and touches various all the spheres of our life. But I'm going to just start the basic principle of the paradigm of narcissism, or we could call it the paradigm of exceptionalism and of hierarchy. Of narcissism is that the basic principle is that life is a zero-sum struggle for survival among fundamentally opposing interests. Zero-sum meaning that what anything one person gains or one element gains is at the expense of the competition. That we can't grow or improve together, that our success is based on winning, and whatever we gain, we take away from someone else. So that life is a zero-sum struggle for survival among fundamentally opposing interests, and therefore that survival depends on dominance, that you either dominate or get dominated, and your survival depends on being dominant. And the dominant metaphors of that worldview are a contest, a battle, a competition, a conflict, a war, hierarchy, dominance, and submission. And the slogan of that could be, do unto others before they do unto you. Do unto others before they do unto you. So in that view that life is a zero-sum contest among opposing interests, it celebrates and promotes dominance over the other. That you either are dominated by the other or you dominate the other, whether it's a person, a class, a race, and so forth. So if it's about dominating the other person, you get the competitiveness and individualism and hierarchy. If it's about sex or sexual orientation, it manifests in sexism and patriarchy. If the other is the other class, then it takes the form of class exploitation. If the other is the other race, then it takes the form of racism. If the other is other peoples and nations, it takes the form of capitalism, imperialism, and genocide. If the other is the other religion or other spirituality, it takes the form of dogmatic fundamentalism and religious persecution. If the other is the species, it takes the form of human exploitation and extinction of other species. If the other is ecology and nature around us, then it takes the form of environmental destruction. If the other is nature inside us, it takes the form of psychological repression. And if the other is a life spirit, it takes the form of suppression of our access to our own inborn spirituality. That it takes that someone else has to dominate us and tell us what to believe, that we don't, and that means that we have to be barred from access to our own spontaneous access to our spirituality. So that paradigm can be mapped as a series of concentric spheres Actually, it's a spiral because the spheres are not insulated from each other. They affect each other. And this class is organized around addressing how this narcissistic worldview impacts our lives in each sphere and how we can contribute to transforming it at every level. Now, the cost of this particular worldview is becoming apparent and unlivable, unsustainable. And therefore, nature is asking us to find a new way for human beings to live on the planet. And I'm calling the new model that's the healing of the narcissistic model, I'm calling it the paradigm of communion or belonging, that we have to transition from a paradigm of narcissism and separateness and exceptionalism to a paradigm of communion and belonging. And the dominant metaphors of that paradigm would be belonging, being the dominant metaphors of that are belonging, membership, communion, mutuality, mutual dependence, community, co-creation, network, web of life, chorus, symphony. It's the basic idea that all parts of life are dependent on a fundamental web of life that is the condition for the existence of everything. And that could be summarized as the Native American view of all our relations, where all our relations are not only each other, but the animals and nature, and also the rivers and the canyons and everything that exists, that we are related to everything that exists. And the idea that we're all together in this. We're all together in this. And the Christian version of that would be do unto others. And another way of saying it is that the hole on the other guy's side of the boat is our problem. So the structure of the class is about addressing and making conscious and helping us clarifying, being aware of the effects of the dominant paradigm at every level of our social and personal lives, and to support us in figuring out how we can each participate in resisting and transforming that paradigm at every level of our lives, and to take our place in creating the transition that nature is asking of us. Now, to say that the dominant paradigm has us at every level, including our unconscious assumptions and beliefs, is obviously daunting. But paradigms, like everything else in this life, have a life cycle. They are born to grow, to develop into their full flourishing, to fall into gradual decline, to die, and in dying, to give birth to something new. Each paradigm begins by seeing new truths and possibilities that were excluded by the blind spots of the previous paradigm. And discuss examples of this as the class goes on. And each paradigm dies when the costs of its own blind spots become apparent, too costly to maintain, and unsustainable. We are presently at a stage where the costs of the narcissistic paradigm in warfare, genocide, extinctions, environmental destruction, inequality and exploitation, and also in loneliness, isolation, loss of human community and meaning and shared meaning, where the costs of the narcissistic paradigm have become unsustainable, and nature is asking us in increasingly uncertain terms to come up with something new. Now, of course, the description of the narcissistic paradigm and the contrast to the paradigm of communion and belonging that we need to transition to is a great generalization and fails to adequately describe the complexity of the reality that we live in. And that is in part because the transition to the next paradigm is ongoingly born within the interstices of the old and ongoingly born not only out of the blind spots, but also and importantly out of the failed promises of the old. For instance, the promise of liberty, freedom, equality, democracy. The failings of the old system to live up to its ideals is one of the places where the new paradigm is ongoingly born within the old. And which means that we are not without resources in this fight. We, the people of our generation, and the people not our generation, meaning old folks, but also the people on the planet at this time, have been part of that birthing from the beginning of our political and social and interpersonal lives. We have been building and discovering and living and fighting for alternative ways of living all along. And these changes and that growth of alternatives to the dominant paradigm, to the dominant paradigm's way of viewing and living in the world, has not disappeared. In fact, Trumpism and the consolidation of the oligarchic economic power that it represents can best be seen as a backlash and perhaps the desperate, violent last gasp, we can hope, of the system of oligarchic power and exploitation. And while we may not be able to know the outcome, the violence of the backlash is, at the very least, a measure of the desperation of entrenched power to maintain its hold and the level to which entrenched power feels threatened in their hold. Which brings it back to us. How to live meaningful, grateful, and engaged lives in dark times. And of course, this has always been the case. The common people have always been the ground of life. The common people have always found ways to live meaningful, joyful, to survive, but to survive with spiritually rich, meaningful, engaged lives, while the princes of power have played musical chairs and visited domination and violence and wars upon them, even so. So we common people are the ground are the real ground for the aspirations and power of the elite. So I want to talk now about good trouble, the right trouble. Is Donald Trump the right trouble? And can we engage with him in a way that gives us an ability to live rich and meaningful and engaged lives? And to talk about that, I'm going to talk about Michael Mead's concept of the right trouble. This is a little different. It's related to, but John Lewis is famous for when they were told that they were troublemakers in the civil rights movement, saying, well, it's good trouble. But this is a little different. Michael Mead is a storyteller and a mythologist, and therefore takes the long view. And he says that in a world that is both cruel and beautiful, contains both life and death, contains both pain and love. In a world the world is always in some kind of trouble. The world is and has always been in some kind of trouble. And the trick, he says, is to be in the right trouble, the right trouble. And the right trouble, by his concept, is not defined by the likelihood of a good outcome or by the outcome, because the outcome belongs to the future and it is not given us to know. This echoes Angela Arian's summary of, she did a summary of spiritual traditions and said in her summary, the deep spiritual traditions all share 4 messages. And one is show up, 2 is do your best, 3 is speak the truth, and 4, and this is the hard one, don't be attached to the result. The result belongs to the future. It is above our pay grade, and it is not given us to know. So, the right trouble is defined, says Michael Mead, by what it brings out in us. The right trouble is defined not by the outcome, but what it brings out in us. By what we learn from it, whether it gives us a sense of meaning for our lives, by whether it gives us a feeling of belonging to something bigger than ourselves, and ultimately, whether it gives us a sense of why we are here, of why we were offered this ticket to ride. And that's a little bit embedded. You don't have to accept this as a cosmology, but it's a little embedded how he tells it, that a lot of traditions have the idea that the ancestors are looking down at the earth and seeing that there's trouble, and they're sending new spirits down to help repair, help heal what's going on. And so they tell the new spirits what their mission is. But as we're born, we are so thunderstruck by the beauty of the world that we forget what we've been told our mission is. And that means that the rest of our life is basically about discovering why we're here, discovering what we're here for. And he teaches mentoring. So it means as a mentor, you're not telling people what to do. You're just saying things like, wow, I noticed that when you do art, you light up. So you're helping reflect and witness people in their process of discovering why they're here, which is unique for everyone. So ultimately, the right trouble is one that helps us understand why we are here and why we belong, what our place is in the whole. Now, belonging, this course in the past has been called belonging to ourselves, each other, and the planet. And so one of the things we've developed and will develop in this course is a deeper understanding of what it means to belong. But for now, the definition of belonging is one, to be fully ourselves and to fill our best potential. Not to sacrifice ourselves or give ourselves up to the whole, but to fully be and express ourselves. And there's a reason why things in nature have teeth and claws, and why plants give off toxins to defend their space from other plants. So one, to fully defend and take care of and express and be, to fully be ourselves. And two, to cultivate our communion and find our respectful place within the web of life upon which all life depends. To find our place in the world and to become good citizens of the world. And to negotiate the complex relationship between the two, between being fully ourselves and being fully respectful of and contributing to and receiving from, gratefully receiving from the web of life. And you notice that that relationship of being ourselves and being together, being in communion, is something that we need to negotiate at every level, whether in our intimate relationships between races and cultures, between nations, between species, between us and the world, us and the environment. That how to both be ourselves and be constructively part of the whole is essentially what we need to negotiate and keep renegotiating. And it's something that's gotten very badly out of balance in the narcissistic and exceptionalist view of life and in the cultural institutions that support that existence and propagate it and impose it. And one important part of the model that the transition needs to happen, that each paradigm operates on the most personal and intimate level and on the most universal level and affects us on every level, and studying how it affects us at each of those levels and how we resist and change that at each level, is that it allows us to accomplish one of the other goals of the class, which is to support each of us in finding our proper place in the transition that nature is calling for. And it's intended as a generous way of looking at it, because it says that at every level we live life and live our lives in a way that acknowledges and expresses and supports the fact that we're all in this together. At every level we do that, whether it's taking care of old people or being a kindergarten teacher or being good neighbors or fighting for the environment or marching in the streets or running for office. Whatever level is the one that most fits our interest, our gifts, and our accumulated wisdom, whatever level is appropriate for each of us. There is a place in there's an opportunity to be part of the transition and to see our life and to have our life have meaning offered to it by us being aware that it's part of a transition to a kinder world that works. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it at that.